From far above it looks like a spark, but the Ethiopian vision begins by lowering your gaze, asking you to notice what has always been beside you, waiting. You were taught that heaven is somewhere else, lifted high above clouds and distance, guarded by gates that only open after death loosens your grip. Paintings trained your imagination to look upward, to expect wings, marble streets, and a throne blazing beyond reach, far from dust and blood. But the Ethiopian Bible opens with a quiet disruption, not an argument but an invitation, whispering that heaven was never meant to be far away. In its pages, paradise is not suspended in the sky like a reward withheld, but threaded through existence like light through fabric. This is not a poetic metaphor meant to comfort grief, but a theological declaration preserved in ink older than Latin and older than Arabic. Written in Ge'ez, a language that outlived empires, the Ethiopian scriptures carry a memory the rest of the world slowly misplaced. They do not point you toward the clouds but turn your attention sideways, toward a reality that overlaps your own breath and footsteps. According to this tradition, heaven is not floating, not distant, and not sealed behind cosmic barriers no human could ever cross. Heaven is near enough to be ignored, close enough to be mistaken for ordinary life, woven into rivers, fields, wind, and memory. This idea alone unsettles centuries of inherited belief, because if heaven is near, then distance was never the real problem. If heaven is near, then the separation between God and humanity was not geography, but perception shaped by fear and forgetting. The Ethiopian Bible dares to suggest that the unseen world is not elsewhere, but here, waiting for eyes that know how to see. To understand why this vision survived, you must understand the land that refused to kneel when history tried to press it flat. Ethiopia stands almost alone in Africa as a nation never fully colonized, never spiritually overwritten by foreign imagination. Armies arrived with cannons, treaties, and crosses, but Ethiopia guarded its faith like a living inheritance, not a borrowed garment. Where Europe reshaped Christianity through councils and empires, Ethiopia shaped Christianity through continuity and resistance. No emperor decided its canon, no council trimmed its scriptures, no foreign hand redrew its vision of heaven. This independence did not only preserve borders, it preserved cosmology, protecting how Ethiopians imagined God, creation, and destiny. While the Western world settled on 66 books, Ethiopia preserved 81, each one carrying a voice the others released. These extra books did not merely add stories, they widened the horizon, allowing heaven to breathe beyond narrow theological walls. When you add voices, you add possibilities, and when you add possibilities, the universe itself begins to feel larger and nearer. Ethiopia's faith was not imported by conquest but inherited through song, ritual, and memory carried across generations. In Aksum, once among the ancient world's great powers, scripture was sung into stone, carved into pillars, and woven into bloodlines. Obelisks rose like frozen prayers, reminders that heaven was not above them, but pressing against history itself. Ethiopia's royal line claimed descent from Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, a story recorded in the Kebra Nagast. According to this tradition, Queen Makeda traveled not for wealth or alliances, but for wisdom that reshaped identity. She returned not empty-handed, but carrying a lineage Ethiopia would guard as sacred, binding faith to nationhood. Whether read as history or symbol, the meaning remains clear. Faith in Ethiopia was something born, not borrowed. Because of this, no outside authority ever held the scissors that cut their canon or trimmed their imagination of heaven. Where Rome imagined heaven as a royal court, Ethiopia imagined it as a living landscape. Where others saw God enthroned at a distance, Ethiopia sensed God walking close, saturating creation with presence. Their heaven was not a palace for escape, but a world restored, healed, and unveiled. Rivers were not decorations but living witnesses, remembering names, stories, and wounds. Fields were not backdrops but participants, breathing with meaning rather than waiting to be abandoned. In this vision, angels were not feathered creatures flapping through empty space. They were presences, intensities, awareness without bodies, arriving by alignment rather than movement. If heaven is not elsewhere, then its messengers do not need wings to cross distances that never existed. This alone reframes the universe, turning separation into illusion and proximity into truth. Western Christianity slowly inherited a heaven shaped like empire, hierarchical, distant, and vertical. Ethiopia preserved a heaven shaped like relationship, layered, intimate, and intertwined with earth. This difference was not accidental. It was protected by centuries of cultural and spiritual sovereignty. Islam came, Europe came, pressure came, but the G's texts remained, unedited and unashamed. Language survived, scripture survived, and with them survived a heaven the world was not ready to keep. Western scholars later labeled many Ethiopian books apocryphal, not because they were false, but because they were unfamiliar. What does not fit an inherited framework is often dismissed before it is understood. But unfamiliar does not mean untrue. Sometimes it means older than the framework itself. Ethiopia's vision may not be a deviation from early Christianity, but a preservation of it. What if the heaven you were taught was the edited version, simplified for empire and control? What if Ethiopia guarded something closer to the original memory of the early church? In this tradition, heaven touches earth like mist touches stone, gentle but undeniable. The divide between seen and unseen is thin, not because reality is weak, but because it is layered. Mountains, wind, and water become hints, not symbols, of a reality pressing close. Heaven does not cancel creation, it completes it. Earth is not discarded at the end of time. It is healed, revealed, and remembered. This makes life heavier with meaning, not lighter with escape. If heaven is near, then how you walk, love, and wound matters more than you were taught. The Ethiopian Bible does not promise an exit from pain alone, but the restoration of what pain tried to destroy. This is why its heaven feels alive, because it was never forced into foreign shapes. It breathes with landscape, memory, and presence rather than architecture and gold. The question is no longer where is heaven, but why did we stop looking where we stand? If this vision feels unsettling, it is because it removes distance as an excuse for disconnection. You cannot postpone responsibility when eternity is near enough to brush your skin. Ethiopia's independence protected more than land. It protected the courage to imagine God without fear. A God not barricaded behind ceremony, but walking among creation as in Eden, not memory but destiny. This chapter opens the door to a heaven not waiting at the end of life, but pressing gently against it. It asks whether the ache you feel is not for another world, but for this one made whole. It challenges the inherited picture and replaces it with something quieter, closer, and harder to ignore. If heaven is beside you, then blindness, not distance, has always been the barrier. And if that blindness can be healed, then the journey has already begun, even before you knew its name. Chapter 1 ends not with answers, but with a reoriented gaze, turning your attention from above to around. Because before we climb the layered heavens, we must first accept that the doorway was never in the sky. It was hidden in plain sight, preserved by a people who refused to let their imagination be conquered. Ethiopia guarded a memory the world forgot, and now that memory begins to speak again. The path forward does not rise into clouds yet, but deepens into meaning, history, and presence. What comes next will not pull you away from the world, but draw you deeper into its mystery. For if heaven is near, then the journey is not upward escape, but awakened attention. And this is only the beginning, because the Ethiopian Bible does not speak of one heaven alone. It speaks of many layers waiting beyond perception, each drawing the soul closer to truth. In the next chapter, the doorway widens, and the hidden structure of the heavens begins to unfold. If chapter 1 shattered the idea of heaven as distance, chapter 2 rebuilds it as purpose, revealing why closeness changes everything we thought salvation meant. In much of the world, heaven is imagined as escape, a final leaving behind of dust, memory, wounds, and the long weight of history. You were taught that the earth is a sinking ship and heaven the lifeboat, reserved for those who endure until rescue arrives. This belief shaped sermons, songs, and fear, training souls to endure life rather than participate in its healing. But the Ethiopian Bible quietly refuses this story, not with rebellion, but with a deeper remembering of creation's original intent. In its vision, heaven is not an exit door, but a restoration process, not abandonment of the world, but its completion. This changes the meaning of hope, because hope is no longer about leaving, but about what this world can become. Ethiopia imagines heaven as this earth transfigured, not burned away, not replaced, but finally allowed to be whole. Mountains are not discarded, they are clarified, rivers are not erased, they are healed, and humanity is not evacuated, but restored. Heaven, in this tradition, is the fulfillment of creation's deepest longing, not a compensation prize for surviving it. This is why Ethiopian prayers speak so often of renewal rather than escape, and healing rather than departure. Where Western theology sometimes anticipates destruction before redemption, Ethiopia anticipates revelation through restoration. The earth is not the enemy of heaven. It is heaven's unfinished sentence. In this worldview, creation itself groans not to be abandoned, but to be completed, to finally reflect its maker without distortion. Heaven therefore looks familiar, not because it lacks glory, but because glory was always meant to live here. Fields become more alive than you remember, rivers move with intention, and the air carries awareness instead of indifference. This is not romanticism, it is theology shaped by landscape, history, and scripture preserved without interruption. Ethiopia's mountains taught its people that holiness does not float, it stands, breathes, and endures. In such a world, salvation is not rescue from matter, but matter redeemed from corruption and fear. This vision challenges the deep suspicion of physical reality that crept into much later theology. Instead of viewing the body as a temporary prison, Ethiopian spirituality treats it as a seed waiting for transformation. Heaven does not erase the body's meaning. It reveals what the body was always meant to express. This is why Ethiopian tradition does not rush to describe heaven in gold and gemstones. Precious materials were never the point. Presence, harmony, and communion were. Gold shines because it reflects light, but in heaven light itself is no longer external. When meaning becomes radiant, symbols become unnecessary. Western art filled heaven with architecture because empires understood glory through buildings and thrones. Ethiopia filled heaven with landscape because it understood glory through life itself. This is not a lesser heaven. It is a deeper one, where creation is not scenery, but participant. In this healed world, every tree stands as testimony that death was never the final author. Every river carries memory not of destruction, but of cleansing and continuity. Heaven becomes the moment when creation recognizes itself without fear. This also reshapes how beings within heaven are understood. Angels, in Ethiopian theology, are not decorative creatures assigned to fill empty skies. They are movements of divine intention, intelligences woven into reality itself. Often described without bodies, without wings, without gender, they appear first as presence, not shape. Their arrival is not a change in distance, but a change in alignment. They do not cross space to reach you, they tune into you when perception opens. This makes angels less like messengers traveling highways and more like harmonies emerging when the soul listens. If heaven overlaps this world, then its messengers do not need to travel far. Wings belong to creatures that must overcome distance, but distance is not the Ethiopian problem. Blindness is. Angels therefore reveal, rather than arrive, and speak, rather than descend. This reframes spiritual encounter as awakening instead of interruption. Heaven does not break into the world violently, it unveils itself gently. This same logic transforms how God is imagined within Ethiopian faith. God is not pictured as an emperor barricaded behind ceremony and fear. Instead, prayers and homilies speak of God walking among creation as in Eden, not nostalgically, but prophetically. Eden is not lost forever. It is promised forward. God's presence saturates rather than dominates, fills rather than intimidates. There is no towering throne designed to keep you small. There is no endless staircase reminding you how far you must climb to be heard. God is near enough to whisper to soil and soul alike. This closeness does not diminish holiness, it deepens it. A distant God inspires fear. A near God inspires transformation. If God is near, then heaven is not found by shouting prayers upward, but by clearing the noise within. This redefines sin not as spatial separation, but as misalignment of being. Redemption therefore becomes realignment rather than relocation. Heaven is the moment creation and creator move in harmony again. This vision explains why Ethiopian spirituality often emphasizes inner sight over external spectacle. Miracles are not proof of power, but signs of restored order. Healing matters because it reveals how reality is supposed to work. This makes ethics heavier, not lighter, because every act touches eternity when heaven is near. If this world is destined for healing, then cruelty is not just wrong, it is out of tune. Love becomes alignment with heaven rather than preparation for escape. Compassion matters not because it earns reward elsewhere, but because it participates in restoration now. This is why Ethiopian Christianity often feels grounded, embodied, and stubbornly hopeful. It does not wait for destruction to justify hope. It expects healing. Heaven is not postponed until history ends. It presses into history wherever sight opens. This chapter invites you to feel the weight of that truth rather than rush past it. If heaven heals rather than replaces the world, then your life is not rehearsal, but contribution. Every choice either aligns with restoration or resists it. This is not a burden meant to crush you, but a dignity meant to awaken you. Ethiopia preserved this vision because it never surrendered its imagination to empires that needed escape more than healing. And now that vision asks whether the heaven you long for is not elsewhere, but this world finally made true. The journey continues, because this restored heaven is not a single flat realm. It unfolds in layers of awareness, each deeper than the last. To understand those layers, we must follow the path the Ethiopian Bible quietly maps. In the next chapter, the first threshold opens, and the soul steps into the garden where heaven begins. If heaven is not distant and not destructive, then the next question rises naturally: how does the soul move within such a reality? The Ethiopian Bible does not answer with a single destination, but with a journey shaped like ascent through awareness. Heaven is not flat in this tradition. It is layered, each level drawing the soul deeper into truth rather than farther from earth. These are not floors in a tower, but movements of transformation, steps of becoming rather than places of arrival. The Ethiopian texts whisper of 7 heavens, not stacked in space, but ordered in depth, intimacy, and clarity. The journey does not begin with glory or judgment, but with relief, because heaven first heals exhaustion before it reveals mystery. The first realm is called Sakai, and it opens not like a throne room, but like a garden remembered by the body. Sakai is the threshold where the soul realizes death was not annihilation, but crossing into a fuller version of being. There is no trumpet blast announcing worthiness, no trial to prove identity, only the quiet shock of continued life. In Sakai, the soul breathes without effort for the first time, as if a lifelong tightness finally releases. The air itself feels like welcome, not because it flatters, but because it recognizes you without interrogation. Fields seem aware, not sentient in human ways, but attentive, holding space rather than demanding response. This is heaven's first kindness. It does not overwhelm, it reassures. Sakai teaches that eternity does not begin with fear, but with rest. Many souls arrive carrying the weight of unfinished struggle, and Sakai receives that weight without accusation. This is where the lie that existence was meaningless begins to dissolve gently. From Sakai, the path rises, not abruptly, but inevitably, toward the second realm known as Cayama. In many traditions, any intermediate realm is imagined as punishment, fire, or terror. Ethiopia refuses this cruelty and offers something braver: purification without violence. Cayama is not a chamber of torment, but a place of honest seeing. Here the soul encounters its wounds clearly, not as condemnation, but as diagnosis. The pain felt in Cayama is not inflicted by God, it is the ache of infection leaving the body. Shame does not rule this place, truth does. Nothing hidden remains hidden, yet nothing revealed is used as a weapon. Cayama teaches that transformation does not require torture. God does not destroy what he intends to heal. This realm dismantles the idea that fear is necessary for holiness. Instead, it reveals that love is precise enough to cleanse without cruelty. Souls leave Cayama lighter, not because they were punished, but because they were understood. From cleansing, the journey continues upward into Mold, a realm unlike anything imagined in Western heaven. Mold is not a city of gold, but a treasury of understanding. Here, questions are not liabilities, they are invitations. Every why whispered in darkness finds space here, waiting like unopened scrolls. Doubt is not rebuked, it is answered. Mold teaches that faith is not blind obedience, but courageous seeking. The soul does not lose its mind in heaven, it finally recovers it. Truth in Mold is not hurled like a verdict, it is received like nourishment. Knowledge does not inflate pride here because knowledge is inseparable from humility. Understanding arrives with compassion, not superiority. From Mold, the ascent moves into barren, a realm described as light beyond light. On earth, light always casts shadows, dividing brightness from darkness. In barren, this division dissolves. Light is no longer something that reveals objects, it is understanding itself. The soul no longer sees things, it sees through them. Partial truths no longer fracture perception. Clarity replaces confusion without erasing mystery. Barren teaches that heaven's radiance is honesty without fear. Nothing must hide because nothing is threatened. From this clarity, the path enters Mayos, a realm of profound inner transformation. Up to this point, the soul still experiences divided desire. Even healed and enlightened, it still wants what God does not always want. In Mayos, this inner conflict begins to dissolve. Not by force, not by erasure, but by fulfillment. The soul discovers that its deepest desire and God's will are the same movement. The long war between my will and your will finally ends. Personhood is not destroyed here, it is completed. Freedom is no longer the ability to resist God, but the joy of aligning fully with Him. Mayos reveals that obedience was never meant to feel like surrender to loss. Beyond Mayos, language begins to fracture. The sixth realm, Zeales, is described in terms closer to vibration than vision. It is the realm of primordial sound, the resonance beneath all creation. Here, reality is not seen or thought, but heard with being itself. The soul encounters the frequency that holds existence together. Creation reveals itself as music rather than mechanism. Zeales teaches that heaven is harmony, not spectacle. Finally, the ascent reaches Ara, the brink no creature can fully describe. Ara is not a place, but a threshold. The boundary between creator and creation becomes as thin as breath. The soul does not become God, but stands as near as a created being can stand. Or here is not fear, but overwhelming intimacy. This is not absorption into fire, but nearness without annihilation. Ara reveals that the ultimate destiny of the soul is closeness, not disappearance. These seven heavens are not rewards for distance traveled, but results of transformation embraced. Movement through them is not measured in steps, but in likeness. The soul ascends not by climbing space, but by becoming more fully itself in God. This layered heaven only makes sense in a universe where distance is not the true barrier. The Ethiopian vision insists the real journey has always been inward and relational. Having traced the path of the soul, we must now ask what kind of universe allows such movement. In the next chapter, we will step back and see the structure beneath these heavens. A universe where matter yields to presence, time bends, and movement is awakening rather than travel. After walking the sevenfold path of the soul, a deeper question emerges, not about heaven alone, but about the kind of universe that allows such ascent. The Ethiopian vision insists that these heavens are not built from gold, stone, or architecture that mirrors human wealth and power. There are no pearl gates because nothing needs guarding, and no streets of gold because value is no longer measured by rarity. Heaven is not poor. It is so rich that symbols of wealth become unnecessary and even distracting. In much Western imagination, matter is upgraded in heaven, dirt transformed into crystal, stone into glass, glass into gold. But Ethiopian cosmology takes a different turn, suggesting that matter itself steps aside. It does not vanish in contempt, but rests, like a tool no longer needed once the work is complete. In these higher heavens, presence becomes more fundamental than substance. Identity is no longer defined by what you own, where, or even what you look like. Identity becomes the unique flavor of your soul, its way of reflecting the one who formed it. This is why heaven in this tradition feels intimate rather than impressive. Awe is born not from scale, but from depth. The soul does not wander through grand halls, it expands into greater awareness. Movement itself is redefined. You do not walk in heaven, and you do not fly. You awaken. In the Ethiopian mystical imagination, the soul moves by becoming. Nearness to God is not achieved by crossing distance, but by growing in likeness. Each increase in love, each deepening of understanding, each surrender of fear is a step. Space responds to consciousness rather than the other way around. The landscape of heaven changes because the soul changes. This is why the heavens are layered, not to keep souls out, but to invite them inward. Distance was never the obstacle. Misalignment was. And alignment is not forced. It is chosen, healed, and embraced. This reframes free will not as the power to resist God forever, but as the capacity to grow toward Him. Heaven does not override freedom, it fulfills it. This also reshapes how time is understood. On earth, time feels like a straight line, relentless and unforgiving. We are born at one end and disappear at the other, dragging memory behind us and fearing what waits ahead. Past wounds chase us, future anxieties haunt us, and the present slips through our fingers. But in the Ethiopian imagination, time does not behave like an arrow. It curves, it spirals, it folds back on itself like a river that refuses to flow in only one direction. In such a universe, the past is not sealed away. Memories can be revisited, not to trap the soul, but to heal it. The future is not locked behind fate. Possibilities can be tasted, glimpsed, and prepared for. Eternity is not endless time, but time redeemed from fear. This explains why heaven feels spacious rather than endless. You are not trapped in a never-ending sequence of moments. You are held in a fullness where meaning does not decay. Regret loses its teeth because understanding reshapes memory. Hope loses its anxiety because fulfillment is no longer postponed. The soul rests in a now that is wide enough to hold past, present, and promise. This vision also changes how judgment is understood. Judgment is not a courtroom spectacle designed to humiliate. It is clarity. To be judged is to be seen fully and truly, without distortion. For the aligned soul, this is joy. For the resistant soul, it is discomfort, not because God is cruel, but because truth is bright. Heaven does not need punishment to enforce order. Reality itself teaches. Fire, in this tradition, is not vengeance, but exposure. What cannot survive love falls away. What is real remains. This makes the universe feel moral without becoming violent. Consequences exist, but cruelty does not. Justice is restoration rather than revenge. This is why Ethiopian spirituality often feels sober but gentle. It does not threaten endlessly, it invites relentlessly. The cosmos itself is oriented toward healing. Even suffering, though not willed, becomes material for transformation. Nothing is wasted. This worldview does not deny evil, it refuses to grant it final authority. Heaven is not God's escape plan, it is God's resolution. Creation is not discarded when broken, it is repaired. This makes every act of love a rehearsal for eternity. Every act of cruelty becomes a refusal of alignment. Life is no longer a test to pass, but a direction to choose. Ethiopia preserved this universe because it never reduced faith to fear management. Its heaven did not need terror to motivate obedience. It trusted that truth, once seen, would draw the soul upward. This chapter reveals that the seven heavens are not arbitrary stages. They are responses to how reality itself is structured. A universe where consciousness deepens, time heals, and movement is becoming. If such a universe exists, then heaven is not strange at all. It is simply reality without distortion. One question remains, and it is the most personal of all. If heaven is near, layered, and healing, what does that mean for you now? In the final chapter, we will return from the cosmos to the human heart and ask what this forgotten heaven demands of life on earth. After tracing the forgotten heavens and the universe that bends toward God, the journey must return to where it began, inside the human heart. Because the Ethiopian vision was never meant to remain distant theology, it was meant to reshape how life itself is lived. If heaven is near, layered, and healing, then life is not a waiting room for death. It is a threshold already open, a crossing already underway. This changes the meaning of faith from belief about the future to alignment in the present. Faith is no longer agreement with ideas, but participation in restoration. Every moment becomes a meeting place between the seen and the unseen. The Ethiopian tradition quietly insists that heaven does not begin when breath ends. It begins when sight opens. If heaven is this world healed, then every act of healing moves you closer to it. Every wound you tend, every mercy you offer, every truth you face becomes a step of ascent. You do not wait for Sakai to rest. You learn rest now by releasing fear. You do not wait for Cayama to cleanse. You begin honesty now by letting truth expose wounds. You do not wait for Maul to answer questions. You seek now without shame or violence toward doubt. You do not wait for Baron's light. You practice clarity now by refusing to live divided lives. You do not wait for Mayos to align your will. You surrender now what you know resists love. You do not wait for Zeales to hear creation's song. You listen now for harmony beneath noise. You do not wait for Ara to draw near to God. You step toward nearness now through humility. The seven heavens are not postponed rewards, they are revealed directions. They describe what happens when a soul grows whole. This makes life heavier with meaning, but also gentler with hope. You are not trying to earn heaven, you are learning how to recognize it. The Ethiopian Bible does not threaten you into obedience. It invites you into alignment. Fear was never meant to be the engine of faith. Fear narrows vision, love widens it. Heaven cannot be seen clearly through fear, because fear thrives on distance, love reveals nearness. This is why the Ethiopian vision feels both ancient and unsettling. It removes the comfort of postponement. You cannot delay responsibility when eternity presses close. You cannot dismiss cruelty as temporary when creation is destined for healing. Every injustice becomes an argument against the shape of reality itself. Every act of compassion becomes cooperation with the universe's deepest movement. If heaven is not escape, then indifference is not neutral. To ignore suffering is to resist alignment. To heal, forgive, and restore is to walk heavenward even now. This vision does not demand perfection. It demands direction. You will stumble, resist, doubt, and fear, but the path remains open. Ascension is not instant. It is faithful. Becoming whole is not dramatic. It is persistent. Ethiopia preserved this heaven not to elevate itself, but to safeguard memory. A memory of God close enough to walk with humanity rather than rule from exile. A memory of creation worth saving rather than abandoning. A memory of heaven as fulfillment, not replacement. The world forgot this not because it was false, but because it was demanding. A distant heaven allows injustice to wait. A near heaven demands response. This is why empires preferred the sky. Ethiopia chose the soil. The Ethiopian Bible does not end by lifting you away. It returns you to the world with clearer sight and deeper responsibility. Heaven is not the denial of earth. It is earth remembered correctly. When you love without domination, you echo Baron's light. When you seek truth without fear, you walk Maul's halls. When you heal rather than punish, you mirror Cayama's cleansing. When you rest in God's nearness, you taste Sakai's relief. When your will bends toward love, you step into Mayos. When you listen beneath noise, you hear Zeales. And when you stand humbly before mystery, you brush the edge of Ara. Heaven is not a spectacle waiting to astonish you later. It is a pattern inviting you to live differently now. This does not cheapen eternity, it dignifies time. Your life becomes the place where heaven either remains hidden or begins to appear. The Ethiopian vision leaves you with no dramatic curtain closing. It leaves you with an open door. A door carved not in gold, but in awareness. A door written not in clouds, but in the shape of love. Heaven waits not for your death, but for your awakening. The spark you once looked for above was never lost. It was always beside you, waiting to be recognized. The journey through forgotten heavens ends where it must, in choice. Not the choice to believe something exotic or ancient, but the choice to live as though nearness is real. Ethiopia did not give the world a new heaven. It guarded an old one the world was not ready to keep. Now the memory returns, asking quietly whether you will see. Because if heaven is near, then every step matters, and the path forward is already beneath your feet.